Hello Year 11 and welcome to our online video lessons. In this video I'm going to recap the information I covered the other day in lesson about the introduction to paper 2. This video is for those of you who may not have been in last week for various reasons, but this is just to catch you up with what we've started on this week and how paper 2 is going to work within your English language exams. So only watch this if you weren't in the lesson, or just follow along with the slides as I just go through some information to help you out with this paper. A couple of things just to note. As I said, I did note this in class the other day. There is going to be a little bit of a change in the way you are taught this paper. So I know last time myself and Mrs. Hex worked through each paper in sequence. So we would take it in turn to do the questions and work through from questions 1 to 5 within that paper. This time we've decided to change it slightly, just to aid with a little bit more consistency, I think, is I'm going to be taking the first half of the paper, questions 1 to 4, the reading half of the paper, and Mrs. Hex is going to take the writing half of the paper, the second half, all right? So it means that two separate teachers will be doing two slightly different things. It just means you'll be doing the questions a little bit out of sequence, but we're hoping overall it will benefit you more doing it this way. So this was the learning objectives for the lesson of the day. By the end of today, I wanted everybody to understand the structure of paper 2, understand what each question of the reading section will focus on, and then by the end of this sequence of lessons, as we move through this paper step by step, you should understand how to approach each question and then be able to collectively build answers to each question. We are just going to take each question bit by bit and work on it together. So we're going back to the beginning, kind of where we'll have more support from my end in helping you answer these questions, and as we go through it over and over, we'll lay off the support and you'll become more independent in your answering of these questions. So what's it about? What is English Language Paper 2 about? The aim of this paper is to develop students' insights into how writers have particular viewpoints and perspectives on issues or themes that are important to the way we think and live our lives. The paper will assess in this sequence: AO1, AO2 and AO3 for reading. Just for reference, AO means assessment objective, and AO5 and AO6 for writing. Section A will be allocated 40 marks and section B will be allocated 40 marks to give an equal weighting to the reading and writing task. Exactly the same as paper 1, all right, marks wise, and at the same time wise as well. You get the same amount of time. We're looking about 45 minutes for section A and 45 minutes for section B. Section A, I said this is the section that I will be focusing on, the reading section, the first 4 questions of the exam. In section A, you'll be required to read 2 linked sources, 2 sources this time, from different time periods and genres in order to consider how each presents a perspective or viewpoint influence the reader. The sources for the reading questions will be non-fiction and literary non-fiction texts. They will be drawn from the 19th century, and then the other one will be from either the 20th or the 21st century, depending on the time period assessed in paper 1. So that depends on what time period the story you look at in paper 1 is from in each particular series. The combination selected will always provide students with an opportunity to consider viewpoints and perspectives over time. And the choices of genre will include high quality journalism, articles, reports, essays, travel writing, accounts, sketches, letters, diaries, autobiography and biographical passages, or other appropriate non-fiction and literary non-fiction forms. And then section B, we'll go over that briefly. It just contains that one question, the writing question. In section B, there will be a single writing task related to the theme of section A. It will specify an audience, purpose and form, and will use a range of opinions, statements and writing scenarios to provoke a response. Overall, you will likely be writing to argue or persuade. It's just the format in which how you do so that might change. But as I said, Mrs. Hex will be going into much more detail about that. And I believe she's putting together some video lessons as well to keep you up to date with that. So moving on to the assessment objectives, okay, these can be shortened to AO1, AO2, AO3, but that does mean assessment objective. The first one there, AO1, where you are tested on your ability to identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas, and to select and synthesize evidence from text. This is your ability to be able to look at a text and understand what's happening, to comprehend what is happening in the text. This is the assessment objective you were tested on for question 1 of paper 1, where you were told to list 4 facts about the thing that you had read. It's a similar scenario here, but the question is framed slightly differently. Question 1 and question 2 will both use assessment objective 1. They will both test your ability to identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas within both questions. I will go into more detail about both questions momentarily. Assessment objective 2 tests you on your ability to explain, comment on and analyse how writers use language and structure to achieve effects and influence readers, using relevant subject terminology to support their views. This assessment objective only applies to question 3 in this exam, or that's the same assessment objective that looked at questions 2 and 3 in paper 1. All right, so we're focusing on language and or structure, depending on how the question comes up. And then finally, assessment objective 3. You weren't assessed on this one in the last one, because this one is about comparing writers' ideas and perspectives, as well as how these are conveyed across 2 or more texts. Obviously, paper 1 only involved 1 text. This one involves the 2. So this assessment objective now becomes relevant. Very quickly, if you'd like to do a quick pit stop here, I know I'm giving you lots of information today, all right? So I've just got a few questions just to help you consolidate what I've been telling you so far. So if you'd like to, please take a pause just now, have a go at these questions, look back at what I've said already if you need to. And then once you've given it a go, I'll quickly go through the answers and then I'll move on to the next piece of information. Okay, so hopefully by now you've managed to have a go at those questions. Question 1 there, what type of writing does paper 2 focus on? It's non-fiction, okay? Non-made up. Fiction is stuff that isn't real. Non-fiction is real life stuff, okay? Number 2, how many questions are there overall in the paper? Same as paper 1, 5 questions overall. And then question 3, how many sections are there in the paper? 2 sections. And same as paper 1, 4 questions in section 1, 1 question in 4 questions in section A, and 1 question in section B. Question 4, what does section A focus on? Reading. Question 5, what does section B focus on? Writing. Okay, again, exactly the same as paper 1. So you do have to look at 2 different sources for this paper. However, you don't need to consider both sources for every single question. And I'll go into more detail about this here. So question number 1. Source A only, and it will always say at the top of the question which source you need to consider. We will do this, and we will practice doing this in class and through these lessons, but just making sure we're paying attention to what we need to be looking at for each individual question. So question 1, source A only. You will be presented with 8 statements, and you must identify all the statements that are true within a set number of lines. Okay, you'll be given 8 statements, only 4 of them are true, worth 1 mark each, 4 marks in total. All right, and as I've already mentioned, AO1 is assessed here. Your ability to identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas. Your ability to recognise what is happening in a text, and your ability to understand what is happening. Question 2, for this one, you look at source A and B, okay? Both sources in this question, where you will be required to write a summary of differences that appear in relation to a certain aspect of the sources. The 2 sources will be linked in some way. They'll be about a similar topic or a similar place, perhaps, something along those lines, okay? So there's going to be something in common, and you are required to write a summary of the differences. So again, it's still assessment objective 1, your ability to identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas, all right? Because it's your ability to take the information that appears within the text and write that summary of them. 8 marks total for this question. Question number 3, source A only, once again, and it does say at the top of each question which source you need to consider. This question will ask you, how does the writer use language to describe someone or something within a set number of lines? This question is very similar to question 2 from paper 1. All right, so we're focusing on language, okay, and it will give you a set number of lines to look at. This focuses on assessment objective 2, your ability to explain, comment on, and analyse how writers use language to achieve effects and influence readers using relevant subject terminology to support your views. And this question is worth 12 marks. So the mark scheme, or the amount of marks available per question, does differ from paper 1 here, where in paper 1, question 1 was worth 4, question 2 and 3 were worth 8, and question 4 was worth 20. With this one, question 1 is worth 4, question 2 is worth 8, question 3 is worth 12, and then that takes us on to question 4, which is worth 16. So question 4, once again, we're looking at source A and B, and this question will ask you to compare how the writers convey their different attitudes, perspectives, ideas about an aspect of the text. Generally, the question always begins, compare how the writers convey their different something, all right? And again, these sources do have something in common. So there'll be something that both the writers talk about or share their ideas on, and your job is to comment on how they convey, how they present those things differently, okay? 16 marks, as I've said, and this links to assessment objective 3, where your job is to compare writers' ideas and perspectives, as well as how these are conveyed across 2 or more texts. Once again, a quick pit stop there, all right? Lots of information coming at you, so if you'd like to take a moment just to consolidate what I've shared with you with some of the questions on the board, you can pause the video here, look back if you need to, but have a go at these questions and I'll run through the answers in a moment. Press play again when you're ready. Okay, going through the answers to those questions. So number one, how many sources will you need to read for this paper? 2 sources, source A, source B. You'll be presented with 2 things you need to read, all right, to answer all of the questions successfully. Question 2, what will question 1 ask you to do? Identify 4 true facts from the ones it gives you in the list. It will present you with 8 facts. You have to identify the 4 that are true. Number 3, what will question 2 ask you to do? Question 2 will ask you to write a summary of the differences between both the sources in some way. Question 4, what will question 3 ask you to do? You're looking at the language in just the one source, in just source A. Number 5, what will question 4 ask you to do? It will ask you to consider how the writers convey their different something, right? Convey their different ideas or perspectives or attitudes on something. And then finally, number 6, which 2 questions require you to use both sources? That is question 2 and question 4. Okay, so I'm going to pause this video just here and I'll pick up again in the next one where we will move on to having a look at the sources that we need to look at for the paper that we're focusing on now, and have a look at reading through them and seeing what's going on.